Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Lauren and I am a psychic medium, and today we're going to be talking about mediumship and everything there is to know about it and how you can start to learn it. And mediumship is all about connecting to loved ones in spirit that have passed, and I would argue also loved pets. Anyone that might have been living that is now crossed over. And there is an assumption here that you do believe in the afterlife. I think that it kind of doesn't work if you don't believe in some version of the afterlife, and that we have the ability or the skill to connect with those folks who have crossed over, and we are able to send and receive messages back and forth. That is what mediumship is, and you can study it and learn it and become proficient in it, to which case you would be called a medium. So welcome if you're new here. My name is Lauren. I am a psychic, also a medium, and I have learned a lot of modalities over the years, and mediumship is one that I've always loved, was terrified of at first, but now is one of the things I do regularly for folks that contact me for readings. So I have an extensive background studying it as well as practicing it, and I'm just kind of trying to distill it all down into this video of like, what are the main things that people always ask me? Like, where do you even get started? What should you even know? And how do you learn how to become a medium? So that's what this video is all about. We're going to talk about what a medium is, the different types there are, how it's experienced, so you can kind of understand if what you are feeling, seeing, hearing is kind of falling in the realm of mediumship. We will also talk about protection and boundaries, especially if you're wanting to get into this. You have to be protected with these spirits. I'll also talk about blocks to mediumship. These are like things that are preventing you from connecting with those that are crossed over if it's something you are trying to actively open up. We'll also learn about the different types of spirits, just very briefly, why they're there, why they hang around, as well as like the major ethics you need to know as a medium if you are going to be providing readings or just connecting with people's loved ones, loved ones that have crossed over for other people. So let's talk about mediums. The first thing that I always like to talk about is, what is the difference between a psychic and a medium? Those things are different but similar. And I always like to start by just talking about what a psychic is. A psychic is somebody that can pick up information from a divine source, somewhere other than like here in our practical reality. We are using our intuition, our psychic ability, to connect to some sort of intuitive source. That could be guides, angels, loved ones in spirit, like whatever it is. You are connecting, or animals as well. You're connecting, you are using your psychic ability to receive psychic hits. Now, with a medium, you are still doing all of that. You are a psychic if you are a medium, because the ability to connect to something psychically, to be able to send and receive psychic messages, that is your psychic ability. So technically you are a psychic. The only difference between a psychic and a medium is that a medium is actively talking to those who have crossed over, loved ones that were living that are now passed. So you can be a psychic and not want to touch spirits that have crossed over at all. And I know several folks who do this. They just want to talk about career, relationships, like whatever it is that they're really good at. But they don't want to jump into like talking to your loved one in spirit. It's, for whatever reason, not their cup of tea. So you can be a psychic, but not a medium. You can decide, I don't want to connect with that specific type of psychic source. But if you are a medium, you are actively connecting with loved ones who have crossed over. So as a medium, you're always going to be a psychic, but it's not like exclusive. It's not like I'm a medium and not a psychic, because you're using the same skills. Really, the difference is, who are you talking to? Basically, I would say a psychic excludes those spirits, and a medium includes those spirits. Now, there's a ton of different types of mediums out there. I feel like every year I hear a new term for a new type of medium. And I'm just going to go briefly into some of these because you can go down the rabbit hole with them. What I would describe myself as, I just call myself a medium, but I feel like the majority of I'm filming this during Mercury retrograde, which was a bad idea. The majority of mediums are going to be mental mediums. And I think that what they mean by that is they're kind of using their mental psychic abilities. I call that using your clairs. We're going to get into that. And you are kind of connecting with these spirits in your mind, basically. And there's also mediums that call themselves physical mediums. These were more popular back in the day. I feel like because they are physical mediums, they are trying to prove a physical connection or have some sort of physical phenomena happen in the middle of a session or like a seance. And basically what they're trying to do is create some sort of physical activity. I feel like these are less and less common just because I feel like we live in a more analytical society that has debunked a lot of these things. When spiritualism first started, it was really cool because a lot of people would go to seances. Like your average everyday person would go to a seance party to try to connect with loved ones in spirit. But unfortunately, back then there were a lot of bad eggs who made things move, on purpose, like would hang things from the wall. They got caught oftentimes trying to fake these physical phenomenons. And so there's a lot of like stigma around it. However, I do see lots of psychics today that are still practicing the art of like physical mediumship. Another type of medium that you'll see pretty often is an evidential medium. I would say that evidential mediums should be all mediums. Basically, a evidential medium provides evidence, and their kind of thing is like, hey, I'm not just giving you surface level, like, hey, grandma says hi, she loves you. Like, yeah. And I think their whole thing is, I'm trying to go deeper with the psychic information. I'm trying to give you more evidence that this is somebody that you know. Now, personally, I was taught that we all should be doing this as mediums, that we should be going deeper and deeper into our psychic ability and understand how it works so that we are constantly providing evidence. I was taught the same thing just generically as a psychic, of like always get deeper, more accurate information and how to do that. And if you're curious about that, that is something that I teach in all of my courses, especially my Psychic Development Masterclass. That's something that I think is not taught very often. We're just kind of taught the surface level, how to get those psychic hits. But I think what makes a really good psychic versus an even greater psychic is those psychics that know how to get deeper, more evidential stuff that's happening through the psychic hits that come through. So again, evidential mediums, I think are there to kind of say like, hey, I'm really going to give you even more. My personal opinion is I think every medium should do this, but it's just another way for them to kind of like stand out and let you know, hey, this is what you're getting when you come to me. The next type of medium is a channeler. You can also be a channeler and not necessarily be connecting to a spirit that has passed on. Like channeling or a channeler is like the way in which you read. And it's a very specific way of basically setting yourself fully aside and letting that psychic source talk for you. So it could be grandma, I'm reading for you, I'm a channeler, I'm reading your grandma, I'm letting grandma fully take over and speak on my behalf. Or again, it could be that you're channeling a very specific like type of spirit guide. You'll see that very often. So you don't have to be a medium to be a channeler. However, channeling, I often see misused a lot, that term, because I think that people think that just being in the zone, being connected intuitively, and just kind of like, oh, I'm reading you right now equals channeling. Channeling, I was taught, is a much deeper kind of like trance-like state where you really can't like you can pull yourself out of it, but you're not having a normal conversation. You're not able to remember your own personal stuff in that moment. It's really truly that your ego, yourself has been fully pushed aside, and this spirit, this psychic source is really talking in your place to the point that you might not make sense. It doesn't sound like you. There's just a whole nother art to channeling. There's different sets of classes on that. And I think it often gets misused. I think you can be channeling to an extent, but it's like, to what degree are you channeling? And I think a full-on channeler, which I do not call myself at this current time, is somebody who's just, again, 100% letting that spirit take over and not at all like having any of their own stuff come through. And I think that takes a little bit of extra practice to really learn how to do. Now, there's of course other branches of mediumship. I think there are animal communicators who talk to dead animals. I would say you're also technically a medium in that sense. There are death doulas and shamans who technically work very closely with I feel like I want to say the art of death. And I do feel like that's probably how they would view it. So there's all different branches of like where you can take this mediumship skill. And again, if you've seen my video of like all the different types of intuitive workers out there, there's so many branches, there's so many ways you could take it. There's really no like wrong way or right way. It's more, what are you interested in? What's that label going to be for you so that you can identify yourself to your clients a little bit better. What does a medium session look like? Most of the time, I feel like your average medium is probably doing a reading over the phone, over a video call, or in person. And it's really just you sitting there, them sitting there, and you're having a conversation back and forth, chatting with this loved one in spirit. Other ways mediums provide their services are they do like seances or spirit circles. And that is basically you get a room of folks together. I do one every now and then locally with like a group, and they do like a full moon spirit circle. And the intention is we're only talking to loved ones that are coming through. So usually that's like everyone gets in a circle. The medium reads for everybody in that kind of like smaller group. And then there are gallery readings, and you've probably seen this in some like older TV, like even more recently, Teresa Caputo, she's done some gallery readings, and that is where you get a full group of people, and some of those people might not be read, but the medium is going around and trying to find answers for each of those folks. Not each of them, but maybe just whoever's coming through strongest. They're usually just like a big group, but not everyone gets a reading. Whereas a spirit circle or a seance, everyone is usually probably receiving some sort of information, even though it might be really like short. And I have done all of the above. I do one-on-ones most often, and then I've also done a gallery reading where I had to do that in my courses, where I read a group of, I think it was 30 people, but I was up there with some other students. And I've talked about that in my podcast, that experience. And then I've also done several spirit circles, especially around Halloween season. It's really popular. So that's kind of all the different ways that you might see mediumship skills being offered. Now, if you're wondering if you are a medium in some sense of the word, I want to talk about how you experience this. And basically, if you are wondering if you are sensing somebody from the other side that is crossed over, I can tell you it's pretty easy because it's the very same thing as understanding your psychic abilities. And with your psychic abilities, you are going to hear things, you're going to see things, you're going to feel things, and you might even smell or taste things, and then other times you just know. Side note, this is your clairs. I talk about it all the time. Your clairs are how you pick up information. There's no different way to kind of sense spirits outside of those psychic abilities. There's not like, oh, you actually sense them in a completely different way. No, your psychic abilities are there for you to connect with any sort of source. And so with this source, it's the same exact thing. You're going to hear, feel, see, touch, taste, smell, all of them, or just know, which is that sixth claircognizance. And I have a whole series on that as well. That's actually how most of you guys find me. I hear that all the time, as everyone's like, I searched clairsentience and I found Lauren. I searched clairaudience and that's how I found Lauren. So truly, if you're wondering if you are seeing a spirit, you are probably, yes, seeing some type of spirit. You are probably, yes, using your psychic abilities, your psychic clairs. I don't doubt that for a moment. It's more just a question of, is that a spirit? Like, is it somebody that has crossed over? Or is it a different type of entity? Is it a guide? Is it a spirit guide? I don't know, an angel, something like that. So you are going to sense it in the same way that you sense psychic information. And that's through psychic hits. And psychic hits can take all of those different forms. They can be very, like, again, clairsentient, clairaudient, blah, blah, blah. You can also see signs physically. You can also see signs very, like, serendipitously, or like, what's the word I'm looking for? Synchronistically. So signs from these spirits can come in all sorts of ways. A lot of people often also experience like physical signs from these spirits when they're first starting out. So there's really truly no wrong way of experiencing it. I think it's more just trying to understand what the heck all of it means. Like, I smelled this, or I smelled that, or I saw a penny on the ground. Who is it from? You know, it's more about further understanding your psychic abilities so that you can answer those questions as these psychic hits come through from these spirits. Now, I will say, just as a side note, like, all mediums do not understand the clairs. They might not even like fully grasp those concepts. That's just kind of the way I was taught and the way I learned. So they might define it different ways. But there are even psychics that would probably say, or mediums, sorry, that would probably say that they don't even use that psychic ability, that they only use tools. And I think that that is a perfectly valid way too of speaking with spirit. Not my preferred way, and you guys know me and how I am about tools, but I think that there are a lot of mediums out there that might solely use like a pendulum or a Ouija board or tarot cards. And so basically what they're doing, instead of being like mental up here, they're just using the tool to communicate with that spirit. Again, not wrong. I think it comes with all sorts of different like variables and caveats, but that is another way that you can connect with spirits. One question I get asked pretty often is like, how do you see them? And I think this is different from everybody because one, it implies that you're clairvoyantly seeing it. Not everybody sees spirits, especially if you have a lot of blocks there around clairvoyance. So you could just hear them. You could hear them calling out names or just talking. You could see them, in which case, like, I have seen spirits like look the way they look when they passed. I have also seen a lot of spirits kind of look the age that they were like most in alignment with themselves, is the only way I know how to describe it. Like, that was the time they felt like maybe the most, I don't want to use the word youthful, but most alive. And so sometimes they'll come through as like a younger version of themselves, sometimes older. I've had that happen as well. And usually that means something, and you know, that's something you can get into a little bit more once you start to understand those psychic hits. Again, there's no right way or wrong way, because sometimes I will see like a very, very clear vision of their face and nothing else. Sometimes I will see their entire full body. Sometimes I will just see a very like specific like body part. And then, I mean, it's different every time, and I think that's partly like my psychic ability, what is it picking up, and it's also them and what are they trying to communicate and illustrate. And I have an older video on kind of like how I like literally see them clairvoyantly, so check that out if you want to understand a little bit more of like what I kind of envision spirits looking like. Now, one thing I have yet to mention is that I do plan on making mediumship an add-on course to the courses that I already have, and it'll be part of like my certification program. So if you are really serious about like getting into this and learning it, definitely keep an eye out for that course. When it's available, I will have it linked down below in the description. Otherwise, you might have to kind of wait if you're seeing this as it comes out. It's like in the queue of next courses to create. But I mention that because with mediumship, there is a lot of extra like ethics and protection and boundaries that you kind of need to learn about, because you know, we're not just connecting with beings for our highest and best good. We are connecting with spirits that could potentially be negative and not be in a good place. So we have to learn some extra protection methods for keeping ourselves and our clients safe. But then there's also a lot of ethical boundaries that come with talking to spirits that have passed and connecting with their families, and how do you navigate certain situations that are a little bit tricky. So speaking to protection and boundaries, yes, we know there's a little bit more that we have to learn. And one of the analogies that I like to use is one that my mentor Karen Fox gave me, and she kind of compared like being intuitive or being like a psychic or a medium, how you are kind of like a a house, and you are a house with your front porch light on, and all the other front porches, all the other lights on all the houses are turned off. And so if you are a spirit and you are looking to connect with somebody, when you find somebody who is intuitive, who is psychic, who is more open, empathetic to some degree, you know, they kind of see you as a house with a light on, and they're like, oh gosh, okay, I can ask this person for help. And I love that analogy because it implies that, one, they notice you and they come to you more often. And two, you have to keep your house safe and protected. You can't just let everybody in that says they're a spirit that needs help. Now, one of the biggest contributors, I think, personally, to accidentally inviting spirits in is fear. I think when you are open and intuitive and your light is kind of on, and at the same time you are fearful of spirits, you kind of unknowingly attract them in. You're thinking about them, you're fearful of them. At the same time, your door is wide open, and so these spirits are more likely to come and visit you. So it's very easy to fall in the trap of connecting to only negative spirits. And I've seen this in my comments a lot, and I've saw it with like some of my coaching clients where, you know, it's something where you feel like, oh, only the negatives come to me, only the negative spirits come. And it really has to do with like, what is your intention? Who are you trying to talk to? And like, what's that fear there? When I first started my mediumship journey, I was very afraid. You know, I had a lot of preconceived notions about how it worked. And because of that, I was sending out this fear, and I was sending out the intention that all spirits that have crossed over are negative and awful and bad. And so, of course, you know, like attracts like. I believe in the law of attraction, and your intention creates your reality. So I was only thinking about the negative spirits, and I was only attracting them towards the beginning. And I was seeing all sorts of negative spirits. So that's why protection is uber important, because you have to know how to say no to that type of energy and say, you know what, I'm only going to talk to spirits that are high vibe, that, you know, can meet all the rules that I have when I'm trying to set my protection and boundaries. So as always, your basic psychic protection is always, always essential. Even more essential, I would argue, with mediumship. That's something that I teach in both my like basic psychic skills course as well as my advanced masterclass course. So if you are really new, I would always recommend starting there, because even if you do plan on taking my mediumship course, those are going to be probably prerequisites to that course. Ultimately, please, please, please do not do this work. Do not jump into mediumship and talking to spirits that have crossed over, even if you're like, oh, I'm only going to talk to my grandma. Because what happens is you unknowingly invite in some other stuff. So it's very important that you understand how to turn on and off your psychic abilities, how to set the intention of who is allowed to talk to you, when are they allowed to talk to you. And you're also learning a little bit of like, how do I talk to that specific one and not somebody else that's like walking on by. So you're going to learn all of those things in that course. Again, protection and boundaries is so important. I do have a playlist on YouTube that is all about how to set those energetic boundaries. You can absolutely start there as well for kind of like a more free resource. That is going to be your number one thing to go do right now if you're really serious about talking to spirit. Now, speaking about blocks, I feel like there's like half and half. Half people come to me because they really want to strengthen their mediumship skills, and then the other half are like, make it stop, make it stop. And so if you are one of those folks that want to strengthen it, but you just cannot get messages to come through, and you're like, how do I talk to somebody that has passed over? There's a lot of obviously techniques and skills to learn. Starting with your psychic ability is what I will always recommend first. However, I think that learning about removing blocks is a key piece to understanding your mediumship abilities. And there are all sorts of psychic blocks. I have a whole video on it, on like why it happens, what they look like. But frequently with mediumship, there's a lot of like common blocks. And those tend to be around like, oh, being afraid of spirits, of being afraid of them possessing your body, of being able to move things, of them like not leaving you alone. There's a lot of those like frequent fears that come up. Maybe you were raised in a very like religious household, and talking to the dead is something that was like very frowned upon. And so you have a lot of like mental blocks there of like, oh, I can't do this, oh, this is bad, or oh, this isn't real. You know, all of those little things, whether they're self-limiting beliefs, things that somebody said to you, something you said to yourself, experiences you've had. For example, if you've messed around with a Ouija board before and shit your pants, you know, you probably have kind of a mental block there of like, oh my gosh, this is scary, this is what this looks like. Or media, television, movies. If you've watched any sort of horror movie, you probably have this conception of like what spirit does, what it looks like. Ultimately, try to understand these blocks, see them, recognize them, and go through the process of how do I remove this? How do I not let this affect me so that I can connect with spirits that have crossed over. Ultimately, for me, educating myself was the most helpful thing of like listening to other mediums, other psychics, understanding like what spirit could or couldn't do. I had to do a lot of reprogramming, especially from like a lot of the shows that I watched to understand, oh, that's not how it works. Oh, they can't take over your body. Oh, okay, cool. But ultimately, understanding your psychic blocks, making sure you understand how they got there, why they're there, and how you can remove them is going to be a key part of your mediumship abilities. Now, as a psychic, there are a lot of basic ethics that you need to learn when reading other people. Again, I cover these in my courses. But as a medium, again, there's that extra step of learning a little bit more of like, what can I and can't I do with my mediumship skills? And technically you can do whatever you want, but I really think that ethical, good psychics are the ones that really try to like be very careful about what they say and do, educate their clients, and again are just very like genuine, authentic, and really try to put a high value on being a good ethical medium. Because with these readings, we're not just like reading about our job or the future that could like potentially yes or no not happen. I mean, you are talking to somebody who has lost a loved one or somebody who's about to lose a loved one. And that stuff is very like personal. And if you're getting things wrong, if you are giving people the wrong type of information, or maybe you have good intentions, but you know, you're just not doing things correctly, you know, it can cause issues with that client or just even issues with you and your psychic ability. Because I do believe that if you are an unethical medium or a psychic, I do think that you start to receive less and less psychic hits over time because you're kind of abusing that power, if that makes sense. So learning the very basic ethics of like reading for others is definitely going to be an essential for learning mediumship. So this is stuff like don't read other people without their permission, you know, making sure that you're not like reading your family members, and there's lots of caveats to that. I've done a whole video on it. But it's just kind of those like basic reading ethics that everyone has to know. Next, I want to talk about just some like tidbits about spirits that I've kind of like conglomerated over many years of like doing this, and just like what they are, how they do things, how they manifest, like how they experience things, just to kind of provide some further information for those of you who are new to this. So types of spirits. I do think that there's a spectrum. There are positive on one side, there are negative on the other, maybe neutral in the middle, but spirits tend to fall somewhere on this spectrum in my experience. And I think that it really depends on their personal journeys, the lives that they've led, how much they are healing from that or not healing from that, and just if they feel stuck or not. I hesitate to use the term crossed over, but it's one that we hear very often, and that just comes again from my own personal reading experiences. I think I was under the assumption that like, okay, you're past and now you crossed over. But I do think that spirits sometimes kind of move in that direction, but sometimes they can take steps backwards. They can get stuck. They can really feel like they need to pass a message along, or they're punishing themselves by ruminating over something that might have happened, or they're not allowing themselves to move forward for whatever reason. And so I think that sometimes I get spirits that are very much in that stuck energy. Sometimes I get spirits that are slowly kind of moving in that direction. And then I do feel like there is a point at which they feel like they're crossed over. There's a line there of like, they're not going to go back. Like they've fully removed their old ego, their old bias, their old agendas, and maybe they're not really even that person anymore. And they've spiritually just kind of like healed enough to where backward movement is like not possible. And again, those are my personal experiences and words to describe it, and that might not be universal to every medium that like connects to spirit. You know, as you become a medium, you're gonna find your own personal preferences, biases, your own kind of personal philosophy on how it works. You can share that, you cannot. I've learned over the years to keep that more to myself and just share what I'm getting. And if somebody is believing in it, they believe it, cool. If not, I kind of say, hey, don't worry about it. If it doesn't resonate, throw it in the trash. But I truly believe that these spirits, they have everything they need. They don't need us to cross over. They are not reliant on us. This is their personal journey. We can absolutely like help them fully kind of like cross over. But I don't feel like they need our help. Like, one of the things that I talk about often is that if you feel like a spirit is coming to you because they want to deliver a message, you are not responsible for delivering that message. You do not have to. Just because you hear something doesn't mean you have to do something with it. And I do think that a lot of mediums have that preconceived notion as they get into it of like, oh gosh, well, I have to help this spirit cross over, or I have to deliver this message to this spirit who says his family lives halfway across the world. No, you do not have to do that. You can close the door, you can lock it, you can say, go find someone else. They have the access to fix all the things they need to fix, heal all the things they need to heal. These spirits do have free will, you know, and they can do whatever they want. So there's a lot of times where you might invite a spirit to like cross over, but they just might not want to right then. They might choose not to. And this is something that I learned in some of my shamanic death and dying courses, was that you can invite them in, but they have free will. They might not be interested. They might not choose to walk into the light. And you can't force them to do anything. Now, another thing I want to say about loved ones in spirit is I do think that they can become guides. I don't think they always become this. Some of them I do feel like want to come back. I believe a weird kind of version of like past lives and reincarnation. This is not the video for that, but I just feel like sometimes they do want to come back. Sometimes I think they're good. They want to hang out and stay as is. And then sometimes I think they're like, I'm done with the human experience. I'm here to be a guide or a help in some sort of way. I also think that sometimes they move on from their families and they're not attached to them so much anymore. And that's hard to hear as a family member. But that definitely does happen in some of my readings. So some other little tidbits that I've learned about spirits is that their sense of time is much different than ours. Like, when we think about, are they okay? Are they, you know, waiting for us? Have they been waiting for so long? Have they missed us? I truly, like, and again, this is coming from them, but it feels like, no, they're like, everything happens so fast. I can go back, I can go forward. Like, time is not linear, time is not experienced in the way that we experience it. And so, like, you showing up, you know, you might pass away 20, 30, 40, hopefully longer than that years from now. And they might see that as like tomorrow, like, you know, and again, don't quote me on that because it's my own personal like findings from speaking to a lot of spirits. I do think that spirits tend to keep their agendas, their biases, their preferences for a while, kind of after they pass. Again, I think this depends on how quickly they cross over. I feel like the more and more that they heal and have less of that ego, the less and less they're going to come in and tell us what we need to do with our lives. However, if they're really still attached to this life and the people that are here and their stuff, they can come in and be very like, you have to do this, you have to do that. And just because they're in spirit doesn't mean you have to listen to them. You know, we can acknowledge them, we can hear them, but that doesn't mean that they know something for our highest and best good yet, you know. And so that's why, again, you have to kind of learn some additional ethics around those spirits, is because they have that agenda and that bias. So they might not be speaking to you and giving you advice like you would receive from a guide. And then lastly, there's some times when you try to connect to spirits and it just feels like they're unavailable. And I think that two different things could be going on here. One, you could just not be connecting very well as the medium. Maybe they feel far away or distant because you're just blocked in some sort of way. Other times, like, I never get an explanation other than like they're busy or they have something to do. But I try really, really hard to like work around that, maybe talk to somebody's guides, try to pull them in as much as possible so that I'm still providing something with that reading. I don't know why. I don't know why, but sometimes they're harder to reach. And again, that might just be purely my psychic ability that day. Now, as far as spirits like showing up, like we know that they can attach themselves to like their family members. And when I say attach, I mean like, okay, I'm reading you. I clearly am sensing your grandma coming through. They're with you is probably a better word. And so spirits can hang around a certain area because they're with or attached to the people. They can hang around a certain area because they're attached to the home or like the belongings, like the physical location, or they're around because we invite them in, we call them in. So you don't necessarily have to be in a certain location in order to connect with them. You can invite them in, call them in. But if you're like living in an apartment complex, for an example, and you have lots of neighbors, you could be picking up on spirits attached to your neighbors, or maybe they're, attached to you, or maybe they're just kind of passing by. I feel like there's a lot of spirits that just kind of like pass by, again, not really attached to you or anyone you know, but they saw your light on your front porch and they want to talk because you're intuitive. So I think ultimately these spirits can be invited in knowingly or unknowingly. I do think that like sometimes when places are called haunted, even if they're not technically haunted, if you have enough people setting that intention about the energy of a space, I do think that it takes on that energy. And so I think that, spirits can come there and start to hang out because they like and they match that energy. I think other times places are described as haunted when they're really actually not haunted, and it's just like this general like energy of like negativity, but there's actually like no spirits there when you like really tune into it. So ultimately they can manifest in all sorts of ways. There's no right way or wrong way. It's more just, okay, looking into it, how did they get here, why did they get here, who are they like attached to, what are they attached to. They could also be attached to like a situation or like an event that might have happened in the area as well. So there's all sorts of ways that you can kind of come across them, and they can kind of like pop up attached to like people or places. And I will not go in depth in this video on this, but if you are having issues getting rid of spirits, I have 2 whole videos on this. One where I like walked you through me doing it myself at a client's house, and then I also have one that's just kind of me speaking to it. But I know that this is a frequent problem, and because of that, I do have an emergency like guide, and it's like a PDF that gives you all my top resources of like how to get rid of that spirit like now. And understanding kind of those concepts around how spirits work, how they don't, is very important for like getting rid of those spirits that you're experiencing. So as we wrap up this video, I want to talk about how you can learn mediumship. My biggest tip is always going to be to learn your psychic ability first, because it is literally part of mediumship. It is the core, it is the foundation of mediumship. So if you're learning about how to use your psychic ability first, that's a great start. And then you can kind of, again, add on the information that you might learn about mediumship. There's all sorts of people that teach mediumship, both online and in person. Personally, I think go to as many like teachers as possible. I learned in person. I think it's super valuable to be able to learn in person and practice with other students in person. I know that's not always like available to everyone, especially depending on where you live. That's why I do think online courses can be like a helpful alternative. Obviously, I have those. I also have like a monthly meetup group where we meet virtually through Patreon to read each other, so you can practice reading other students if you really don't have like any courses, any groups, any meetups in your area. So I will link all those down below so you can get started. Again, as soon as my mediumship course is out, it will also be linked below. So thank you so much for watching. Let me know if you have questions. I know that I just grazed the surface of everything with this video, which is kind of what I was hoping to achieve. So let me know what more you want to know about mediumship, about connecting with spirits. I'm happy to do more follow-up videos. If you liked this video, please give it a big thumbs up, and I will see you in my next one. Alrighty, bye!